Hello there, you are joining me from the inside of a NISSAN SKYLINE 200GTt. My name is Bill Sioture, and today I'll be telling you quite a number of things about this car. So what happens when you want a premium sedan, but you find the Mercedes C-Class, the Audi A4 and the BMW 3 Series are somewhat expensive? Or still, you have 2.3 to 2.5 million shillings, but you don't want the common Toyota Mark X or the Mazda Atenza, which is now selling like hotcakes. Most probably your answer could be the NISSAN SKYLINE 200GTt, or if you like, it's also called the INFINITI Q50 in other markets. Welcome back to the channel, and if you've been looking for information about this car, you are now on the right place, and I tell you that I'm going to give you some good information about this car, so you better hang around until the end of this video. This is a highly anticipated review because every single day when I'll be trying to put a different review, I'll not miss a comment or a message from someone who's asking about this car. Remember, 026 Motoring is a tried and tested motoring partner. Basically, we help you with information about cars. Check out our social media platform, that is a TikTok, Facebook, YouTube and Instagram, 026 Motoring. You will actually find our reviews there. And if you want to purchase a car, either whether it's this NISSAN SKYLINE or the rivals, you can also shoot us a message or call us on the number below. We are going to scout a clean car for you, run it through all the checks such that your car ownership journey becomes easy. All right, here we go. NISSAN SKYLINE 200GTt review. So before we proceed, let's first deal with the basics. Now, what you are seeing is a NISSAN SKYLINE 200GTt. Let me put that one clear. But you may be surprised that you are not seeing a NISSAN logo up front. Basically, whatever you are seeing is an INFINITI logo. And for starters, INFINITI is a luxury version of Nissan. Basically, it is what Lexus is to Toyota. So don't freak out if you're not seeing that Nissan logo up front. Basically, all Nissan Skylines are from 2014. Even for the Nissan Fugas, they'll be coming with this INFINITI face, and the rear side will be inspired by INFINITI. But of course, on the back, if you're keen, you'll see that Skyline name or the Fuga. For those people who will be purchasing the elder sibling to this car, that is the Nissan Fuga. It's also called INFINITI Q70 in other markets, but this one is called INFINITI Q50. So the Nissan Skyline, immediately you hear the Nissan Skyline, if you are a motorhead, most probably you think that it's a performance car, because we have that R33, R34 and R35 that are actually performance monsters. But now these are Skyline, these are 200GTt. It is not a performance car. This basically is a compact sedan that should get you from A to B in your daily activities. So this one should not be promising you freaking performance. It's not something that is going to set your world on fire. But I'll be getting into the performance element in a few moments. So these are Nissan SKYLINE 200GTt. It is called the V37 version. From 2014, the Nissan SKYLINE was actually redesigned from the previous V36 and the other one V35. Now what you are seeing here is a complete redesign in terms of the body design, and most importantly, these cars are new mechanical DNA, but I'll be getting into there in a few moments. Now, when you're looking at this car in terms of the design, up front you see that it has this INFINITI logo here, because INFINITI is a luxury version of Nissan. And I like it this way with this logo because it's now more aggressive and actually, let me say, better looking. It also comes with these LED headlamps here, with these turn signals here, and these are fog lights here. Basically, when I'm looking at the design of this car, let me say it's now mature and it's now better looking in terms of aesthetics. So this Nissan Skyline is slightly longer than the previous generation, but by a negligible difference. When you're looking at this car from a side profile, it looks like a sporty sedan. Now, this car comes with these 17-inch alloy rims. I like them this way because this one will actually come with some thicker rubber. Of course, you can customize and you can actually have 18 or 19-inch rims, but these are the best in terms of how our road look like. Because if you're putting low profile rubber, you better then stick to the highway. It is a sleek offering. It comes with these let me say lines here, which actually make it a pretty good looking sedan. Now these are Nissan Skyline 200GTt looks from the rear side. It comes with this twin exhaust, which actually all versions come with these twin exhaust, which gives it a very good look and a sporty look. This is an aftermarket exhaust, that's why you are actually hearing that it's somewhat loud. Of course, I'm going to make you listen to it. Now, you have this Skyline name here, of course, to tell you that it's a Nissan. You have these tail lights here. Basically, when I'm looking at this car, it's from the rear side, it's somewhat conservative. Up front is where you're actually going to realize the most change. Now, this car is called the Nissan Skyline V37. Now, from 2014, this Nissan Skyline received a complete redesign in terms of the body design, but most importantly, also the mechanical setup was changed. And now, speaking of the mechanical setup, let me quickly take you through the engine options in this Nissan Skyline V37. Now, the previous generation V25 engine has now been chopped off from their lineup, and it has been replaced by a 2000cc turbocharged petrol engine, which is actually borrowed from Mercedes. It's actually called the M274 engine. If you are a car savvy or someone who has done some research about cars, you're going to realize that that M274 engine is the exact engine you're going to find in cars like the Mercedes GLC, some versions of the GLA, some versions of the E-Class, and the Mercedes C250. In terms of the engine variations, even in the market, you're going to interact with this 200GTt. It's the most popular engine in the market. I've played with the 3.7 liter, but I'll not be talking about that one in today's video. And my interaction with the 3.5 liter hybrid is actually very shorter than a chicken love making session. Let me put it that way. So I'll actually reserve my comment about that 3.5 liter with a hybrid version. You may be asking yourself, why this engine is downsized to a 2000cc. So nowadays manufacturers are downsizing their engines, of course, for fuel consumption issues, and then to meet emission regulations. That's why these days majority of the V8, V6 engines are now being chopped. They are now being downsized with the addition of a hybrid battery setup or a supercharger or something to do with a turbo. Now, this Nissan Skyline also received revisions in terms of the gearbox, because this 2.0 liter M274 engine up front here is now paired to a 7-speed automatic gearbox, which is also borrowed from Mercedes. So it's not like the previous version, which used to have a 5-speed automatic gearbox. Now, this M274 engine paired with that 7-speed automatic gearbox transmits power to the right wheels. Transmits power to the rear wheels. But if you had it that it transmits power to the right wheels, of course those ones are the right wheels because of the driving element. Now, when I'm looking at the power delivery of this M274 engine, I'm looking at around 208 brake horsepower and a healthy 350 Newton meters of torque. Now that is where the real torque is. Now, the previous Q50 engine used to climax at around 220 HP, but the torque figures were somewhat low. So basically, this one is improved in terms of the torque ratings, but the horsepower numbers are closely similar to the previous generation. Now, the importance of that torque numbers is that you get that torque from a very low RPM. So basically that means you don't need to rev this car much for it to move. And if you are not stressing the car to move, basically that one should translate to impressive fuel efficiency. Keep on watching, because I'll be telling you more about the fuel numbers in a few moments. So how does this Nissan Skyline 200GTt drive? Basically, I'll say that it's a simple car to drive. With my driving position here, I'll say that I have a very good visibility of the road. The gearbox, I feel like it's jumpy, of course, from the lower gears, but it tends to be smoother once you try to gain speeds. Now, when I'm looking at the steering feedback here, of course, the steering wheel, let me say it's like a fly in soup. Basically, the gearbox is good, the engine is good, but the steering response here, it's something that I'll try to pull the analogy of a fly in a soup. So it's basically what spoils the good broth here. Basically, it's because Nissan incorporated something they are calling steering by wire, or let me say something to do with adaptive steering. There is a term they are using, but the average Tom, Dick and Harry will not realize that. They are going to find it somewhat responsive. So basically, this is a steering wheel. In summary, it's not like the traditional steering wheel whereby the feedback is directly sent to the wheels, but in this case, whatever the maneuvers you're going to make on this wheel are sent to some electric motor somewhere or some computer, which now sends the signals to the wheels. So basically, you are going to lack that traditional feedback from the steering wheel, but the average Joe is not going to realize that one. So it's not a big deal. In terms of power delivery, these are 2.0 liter 4 banger here. It's actually a very potent engine, and it's more responsive than the previous 2.5 liter Q50, because for the previous one you needed actually to press it a little bit hard for it to make power, but this one you just need to place your leg on the accelerator pedal and it's not actually going to struggle to move. And then when I'm looking at the marriage of the engine and the gearbox, I feel like this gearbox is actually, let me say, somewhat smoother than the previous generation. Of course, that one is obvious because of the improved, because of the higher number of ratios. Now, in terms of handling around corners, it's, let me say, it feels settled in its lane, and it doesn't feel like it's about to get out of a position. But you also have to be a little bit cautious when you are driving on a winding road, especially when you are driving a rear-wheel drive car, because there's that possibility of steering. It's quite common in rear-wheel drive cars. So you will not be driving it as how you'll be driving something like a Mazda Atenza or a Toyota Camry, which is basically a front-wheel drive car, especially when it has rained. On the highway, I feel like this is a very good car to drive. You have 3 driving modes. Basically, you can switch between sports, standard, and snow. But basically, when I'm looking at the Kenyan roads, the usability, you can only utilize the sports mode and the standard mode. So basically, under standard mode, the car is normally efficient. But when you flick the car into sports mode, what normally happens is that the car now feels like it's jumpy. It's like an animal that has been tied to a rope that wants to release itself. It wants to go, it wants to jump. And basically, what normally happens when the car wants to jump and it's holding to high RPMs and the lower gears, the car will actually consume more fuel. But I like it this way because the car is trying to hold to 2000 RPM and it's always ready for that to give me that overtaking push. Under normal driving occurrences or day-to-day operations, I'll advise that keep it under standard mode, because under standard mode the car is actually, let me say, it's somewhat efficient, because this car in sports mode, you can actually feel that it's a little bit louder. Of course, that one is also complemented with this aftermarket exhaust system. But the biggest liability of keeping this car in sports mode is that high fuel consumption. But still, it's actually something you want to try once in a while, and you want to show your fellow guys with a natural aspirated 2.5 liters that at least you have some good character under the bonnet. You get that power immediately when you want it. Now, some versions of this car will actually, the high-end versions will also be coming with paddle shifters for those people who also want to feel how a manual mode will drive. But I think for a 7-speed gearbox, which is actually clever, I feel like I don't really need those paddle shifters. Leave paddle shifters for those people with the CVT gearboxes who want to fake that they have a manual transmission or a conventional automatic gearbox. And another thing I really like about this NISSAN Skyline compared to the rivals is its braking capability. That moment when I'm in traffic, I want to brake something like this one and then swerve overtake, I feel like the braking system here actually does its job pretty well. You don't need to freak out like you'll do in other cars. I'll not be mentioning in this post, in this review. But the braking capability of this Nissan Skyline it's something you really want to write about, or you want to talk about, because it's actually very impressive. So in terms of the highway driving, this car compared to the rivals, I feel like it has the right ingredients to make a good daily drive at a budget. Because when you're looking at its budget, there are not many petrol cars that will be driving or will be handling as good as this Nissan Skyline 200GTt. I think Nissan did a good job downsizing the previous Q50 engine to this one M274 2-liter. Basically, it's because the previous 2.5-liter used to sound like somewhat like a Gazla. I know this one has actually improved in terms of fuel consumption. I don't know whether it's my aggressive driving style or it's the possibility of having a lead foot, because I'm seeing figures around 10.8, 11.2 kilometers per liter. Those are my realistic fuel figures. When I try to push this car under sports mode, the fuel efficiency can actually drop to something like 9.8, 9.5 kilometers per liter. But it's not much of a bother, because under sports mode, this car tends to hold to lower gears and higher RPMs. So when you are putting the car in sports mode, basically you want more power, and performance will always come at a cost. A friend of mine has this car and they have told me they are doing 12 kilometers per liter. I've seen people say that they can do 13 kilometers per liter, but I'll say if you'll get 13 kilometers per liter from this Skyline 200GTt, those figures sound somewhat ambitious to me, but you must be extremely disciplined. This car also has that auto start system, which actually means that when you're in traffic, the engine will actually tend to shut off, of course, to save you some fuel. It's actually pretty similar to the AS engine Mitsubishi and something like I-Stop in the Mazdas. And then when I'm looking at the fuel tank capacity of this car has 80 liters. That is actually more capacity than even many crossovers will be parking outside there. It's even more than the 70 liters I normally see in Mach-X. So basically, if you are going to average the figure around 11 point something 12 kilometers per liter in this Nissan Skyline, basically once you refill that fuel tank, it should give you a range of around 900 to 1,000 kilometers on one refill. The other day someone was asking me, I have 2.3 million shillings. Please recommend something that is reliable and unique. They were looking at something like the Mazda Atenza, the Toyota Mach-X and the Legacy. But I told them you can also add a Nissan Skyline into the mix. I told them go for the Nissan Skyline 200GTt. I've lived with a 2.5 Mach-X, a GRX 135. It's a pretty good car. But you can also not go wrong with this Nissan Skyline. Basically, when I'm looking at the reliability index of this car, this is a 2-liter M274, which has a tested and a tried reputation from Mercedes. It's not as good as the previous VQ25, because you see this one has a turbocharger. Basically, it's stressed. So when I'm looking at this car, when it has a low mileage below 150, below 200,000, basically, you'll not be having any issues with this engine. Of course, when the car ages, when ages, I mean mileage above 200,000, of course, there will be issues with turbo problems, timing kit failing. Sometimes it can have oil consumption issues. So basically, if you are buying this car and it has a mileage of below 200,000, it's as good as any other reliable mid-size sedan. So the guy told me he has been advised not to buy any Nissan car, basically because they have transmission issues. Now, this car has a 7-speed automatic gearbox, also borrowed from Mercedes. It's not like a Nissan Tian or something like a Nissan X-Trail, which comes with a continuous variable transmission, or CVT if you like. So this transmission is very strong. It doesn't have any issue with overheating. So basically, when I'm looking at this car, yes, it is a Skyline, it is a Nissan, and Nissans have a tainted reputation in the Kenyan market. But basically, this is like a Mercedes C250, which is covered in a Nissan body. Let me put it that way. So in terms of reliability, when I'm looking at this car, it may not go to a very high mileage like something like a Toyota Mach-X will do for GR, or something like a natural aspirated Mazda Atenza petrol. But there are very many things that are good here, but that the rivals will not give you. For example, this car is more powerful than a Mach-X. This car has a better transmission than something like a Subaru Legacy. So when you're purchasing this car, there is that compromise you're making. Of course, Being a turbocharged engine, of course, it may not have a longer lifespan like the previous 2.5 liter, but the fuel consumption of this car is something to write home about, and the power delivery. So if you are asking me about the dependability of this car, I'll say definitely this is a dependable car. As long as you give it a normal treatment, that is a routine treatment, it's something that basically cannot fail you, unless it's a high mileage machine. And basically, if you buy this car at 100,000 kilometers and it serves you to like 250,000 kilometers, and then it starts issues, basically it will have served you for a long time. There is no reason whatsoever to complain. But be at low mileages, you'll not be having any problem whatsoever with this car. Matters the gearbox, 7-speed, and this M274 engine. So in terms of dependability, this is a car I'll highly recommend. How the cabin of this Nissan Skyline 200GTt looks like, and basically from the previous generation V36, you can actually tell that it's quite improved, because what I like in this car is these these screens here. Of course, you have a bunch of functionalities on the lower one. The upper one should do something with the navigation. The lower one gives you media control buttons and the climate control buttons, etc. When I'm looking at this center console here, you can also control your volumes or your media from this center console using this rotary knob here. You can also use this, you also have this drive mode selector. Basically, you can customize your personalized driving mode. You can move it to sports, you can move it standard, and then snow. Of course, it's good manners driving it in standard because of fuel efficiency. Now, when I'm looking at this car, this is not a high-spec version. It's let me say it's more of a base model, because for a high-spec, you'll be finding things like a sunroof, but it's also quite loaded. Your volume control buttons on the left side, cruise control here. It also comes with these auto start system, of course, to improve your gas consumption, especially when in traffic. This car comes with these half leather seats, which are actually very comfortable, and they also have electronic adjustability for the front passengers, or for the front occupants, let me put it that way. So basically, when I'm looking at this car compared to the previous generation, I think that it's somewhat improved. Of course, it's not as fancy as something like a Mercedes C-Class or an Audi A4, something like a BMW 3 Series. But I think Nissan did some good job when crafting this interior. It's well put together. In terms of accommodation, this Nissan Skyline is actually pretty comfortable, because this is my, let me get my driving position that way. This is now my driving position, and I feel like the amount of headroom is not that good, but it's okay for an average person like me. The amount of knee room is actually pretty okay. If I'm maintaining my driving position, you can actually tell that this Skyline is generous to the rear occupants. This amount of knee room is actually pretty good, and the seat is actually very comfortable, so you'll not be having any problem when it comes to long distance travels. And the amount of headroom here is actually better than what you are finding up front. Now, this is a rear wheel drive car with this big transmission drive shaft here. So that means this middle seat will not be actually it's not comfortable. So is the Skyline 200GTt practical in terms of the trunk? Let's find out. So the button is at a funny location. This is the amount of room you have. Of course, it's not the most, it's not the biggest trunk space out there, but it's not as massive as what maybe a Crown has or something like a Fuga. But this car is smaller than those aforementioned cars. So this car is stock. It has its original suspension, and you can actually tell that it sits low to the ground. Basically, this should tell you that this is a town car. Basically, this is not a car that you are purchasing and taking it for upcountry usage, because you'll be scratching the underbelly of this car, because for those poorly erected bumps, you have to go zigzag. So is the Nissan Skyline 200GTt value for money? Definitely, I'll say that this is a lot of car for 2.3 to 2.5 million shillings. Now, when I'm looking at this car, it is the fastest in the class. Basically, it's faster than all Mazda Atenzas, to diesel or petrol. It's faster than the 2.5 liter Toyota Mark X. It's faster than a Subaru Legacy 2.5 with the FB25. And basically, when I'm looking at in terms of the driving dynamics, it's also more fun to drive than everything else in the class. So basically, when I'm looking at this car, at the price tag of 2.3 million shillings, I feel like you're getting a lot of cars for the money. And now, these are 10-year-old cars. When you go into the market and you want to purchase something like this one, a 2014, most probably you are going to find them with a price tag of 1.4, 1.5, 1.6. Of course, that one depends on the condition of the car and the reasons, the urgency of the seller. So basically, For 1.5 for a local used car, this V37 Nissan Skyline, I feel like it's a lot of car for the money. You get a potent engine, a very comfortable interior, and something that really stands out. It's not as common as the rivals. So before putting your money on a Toyota Mark X, I've been referring to the Toyota Mark X quite a number of times because it's a car I've lived with for quite some time, or something like a Mazda Atenza or a Subaru Legacy. I'll say that most probably you also need to test drive this Nissan Skyline 200GTt. Basically, the way I'm looking at this car, I'm looking at it like a Mercedes C-Class on a budget. Basically, let me say that these are poor man's Mercedes-Benz. The only thing that this car may not be as good as the rivals. For example, the Mark X can easily be found with a GRX 135, that is an all-wheel drive. The Legacy comes with the all-wheel drive, which is a standard. The Atenza is a front-wheel drive. So basically, in terms of the drivetrain, you're going to have problems with this car, especially when you're going off-road or on slippery terrains. But then on the highway, this is actually a very good car to drive, especially when I'm comparing it to rivals. So basically, when I'm looking at this car, it's something that, let me say, Kenyans have not really discovered. And then Nissan has a tainted reputation in the Kenyan market, and I think that is one of the reasons why this car has not yet sold properly in the Kenyan market. But if you want this car, but you don't want it with the Mercedes internals, you want it with the old VQ25 engine or the VQ37 engine, you can also get into the market and purchase the Nissan Fuga, which is a slightly bigger car than this one, which means you get more room, but you still get the reliability of a natural aspirated V6, but that car consumes more fuel than this one. So if you ask me, this 2.0 turbo, it's actually the best pick of the range. It's the sweet spot of the range, let me put it that way. I think I've tried my level best to give you some information about this Nissan Skyline 200GTt, and whatever you've been looking at is a 10-year-old car, 2014 car. So basically you can tell that these cars can actually hold to their interiors and shape pretty well. If you want more information about the rivals of this car, I've actually done quite a number of comparison articles on our Facebook page, that is a 0 to 6 motoring. You can actually check it and learn out how this car stacks up against the Mazda Atenza, the Toyota Mark X, the likes of the Subaru Legacy. And also, should you want a separate review of the Toyota Mark X, I've actually done a comprehensive one on the Toyota Mark X GRX 135. You can check it on the channel. And in a few days, I'll be reviewing a Mazda Atenza, so you can actually keep an eye on this channel. And most importantly, always remember to subscribe to this channel, because that is the only way you're going to help this platform grow. And if you want to purchase a car, whether it's this one, Nissan Skyline 200GTt, the Subaru Legacy, Mazda Atenza, Toyota Mark X, Honda Accord, Toyota Camry, we can always scout a clean car for you, subject it to all the tests, and ensure that you are going home with a clean car. That is the goal of 0 to 60 motoring. All right guys, I think that one is enough for today guys. Bye for now. I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe.